Okay, let's finish up chapter 11. I'm going to begin on page 208 with the graphs section. There's just some guidelines here I want us to look at, and then I'm going to do some demonstration using some Excel spreadsheets and creating graphs and showing you a little bit about how to navigate around creating various charts, graphs. They mean the same thing. But remember, I've already said that graphs create a visual, and as human beings, we're very visual. So anytime we can take a whole bunch of numbers and put them in a bar chart or a column chart or a pie chart with some color and little data labels and titles and whatnot, or legends, it sure helps make more sense. So that's what we're going to tackle in the last part of this chapter. I do want you to look at the guidelines that are indicated in your textbook at the bottom of page 208. The fact that they should be easy to read, they should be simple in content. Less is more when you're creating charts, because it's difficult to make sense when you've got tons of lines and colors and a legend that's got 12 different items in it. That's just too much. So keep the content simple. If you have to create multiple charts, then do that to illustrate various points of data. Make sure everything's labeled correctly. You don't want to confuse the reader by misspelling something or using an abbreviation that doesn't make sense. So be careful. Don't try to avoid using abbreviations anywhere if possible. Now, looking at the bottom page 208, I want to quickly go over this. The title must relate to the graph that it's displaying, follow the guidelines like we talked about when creating a table, what it is, who it's about, the time period, etc. When several variables are included on the same graph, you should identify with a legend or key, and I'll show you that in just a moment. Categories should be natural. In other words, a vertical axis, what we call the y-axis, should begin at 0 and then work its way up. The scale of the values for the x-axis reads, x-axis going horizontal, reads from the lowest value on the left to the highest on the right. The scale of values for the y-axis, that's the vertical axis, extends from the lowest value at the bottom of the graph to the highest at the top. So I can always remember the difference between X and Y, because when you think of the letter Y, remember it's got that vertical stem on it when you draw a capital Y, and it's vertical. Therefore, I can always remember that the axis that's going vertical up and down is the Y axis. The X axis over on page 209 is the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That is your x-axis. Okay. Scale captions are placed in both axes to identify the values clearly. For example, Monday, Tuesday, they're not abbreviated, they are included, and it makes sense. The numbers, you can easily read those numbers, and they're at increments that are easy to decipher. Graphs should emphasize the horizontal. It should be easy for the eye to follow it across. And that's why I said a while ago, sometimes less is more. So don't include, 15 points of data in one little chart because it's going to get too crowded and be confusing to read. Okay. So look at those guidelines there, the bulleted items that are listed on page 208. And what you see on page 209 is a nice clear chart. You can see there's grid lines in the back, those horizontal, what we call horizontal major grid lines or major horizontal grid lines that just help the eye work its way across. You've got the y-axis at the left with a axis label that says or axis title that says number of patients. You've got the x-axis at the bottom, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, etc., with a x-axis title, which is day, and it's very clear what Monday is. Monday is roughly 1200, and then the actual number, because they added these what we call data labels, is actually 1256. So they included data labels with those various series to indicate the exact number. All right. Over on page 210, they give you illustrations. Let me back up. What you saw on page 209 is a one variable bar graph, in other words, one series of data. But on the next page, you see a two variable and a three variable, and you can obviously see the three variable gets, gets a little busier there, but you still have a legend that represents the different variables. The family practice is the dark bar, the gray bar is orthopedic, and then neurology is the white bar there. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a chart and then manipulate it and then do a pie chart. But I'm looking at the top of page 211 and I have a Excel spreadsheet here. I'm going to start with this one. And I just basically, well, I built this myself and I just used the data that's at the top of page 211 and built the data. So what I want to do is take this data and all I have to do is click anywhere in this little table. Now to get all this color going on like this, make it look pretty, I selected my data and went up here to Format Table, and I could have chose any of these options, whatever suits me. Okay, I just tried to mimic what you see in the book, but I could have gone pretty bold with some of these colors. It's just whatever you prefer. Okay. All right. So sitting in the table, I'm going to go to Insert, and I'm going to look at this chart section, and I can go Recommended, or if I know I want a column chart, or if I know I want a pie chart, I can go directly to them. But if I go to Recommended, okay, they're recommending a column chart. Now in the book, they call this a bar chart. I call it a column chart because that's what Excel calls it. If none of these suit me, and I want to explore all of my other options, if I click on all charts, you can see there's tons of different chart types that I could use. And honestly, we typically use a column chart, a bar chart, a pie chart, line chart. Um, uh, those are the basic ones that are typically used. So I'm just going to keep it real simple. I'm going to choose this column chart right now, and notice everything goes in a vertical fashion, and I can move it around and place it. If I've got a ton of data, I'm probably going to want to move this to a sheet unto itself, so that if I try to print, it's not going to be so crowded with the data. But it's just a little bit of data, and here's my chart. Number of patients, that's labeled very nicely. Here's what I don't have. I don't have a x-axis title. I don't have a y-axis title. Okay, well, let me fix that. So I'm going to come over here to my little plus symbol, and I'm going to go to Axis Titles. And since I want both of them, I'm going to check the box. And so x-axis or y-axis over here, I'm going to triple click, and this is the number of patients. Okay, my x-axis is the age of patients. Okay, and then of course I could select both of those by holding down. Let's see if it'll let me do it. Control. It's not letting me select both of them. So regardless, if I select it, I can always bump that up a little bit in size. I can make it bold so it's a little easier to see. Make them consistent and bold. I think it was 12. Okay. All right. If I want my title to be more pronounced, I can make it larger and bold. I could make it have a particular background. I'll go light blue. Okay, just make it stand out. If I don't like the color of these, what's called data bars here, okay, I can select one and it selects them all, and I can right click and format that series so that it is a different color. Okay, a little bit light, so I'm going to go with a dark, or you could go with some sort of gradient fill, just whatever suits you and looks nice. Okay. Another thing I could do to this chart, just like they showed us in the book a minute ago, is add what we call data labels on the ends of these. And to do that, I'm going to click my little plus. I'm going to go to data labels. I'm going to click my little arrow, and I want my data labels. That looks okay. Inside base, outside in. I think that looks pretty nice there. Okay, you could do a call out. You just got different options. So I like the outside end, and that's how you make that happen. And then if you think they need to be larger or maybe bolded, I could do that to make them stand out more. So you see how there's lots of options you can do to enhance the look of a chart, not just go with the default. Okay. I could select the chart and do a solid background and make it very light, or I could go with gray. Maybe I don't like the background color there. I want to match it up to that gray that I chose a minute ago. Okay. And horizontal grid lines are in the background. If I wanted to take those away, I could come down here to grid lines, click the arrow, and uncheck primary major, and they go away. I like them because it helps the reader's eye follow across. You could do primary minor, but that gets a little busy looking. I like the major grid lines. Okay. The legend, I don't need a legend with this one variable table. Okay, so what I'm going to do just to demonstrate another option is I'm going to go back to this proportion demonstration. I think I did this in the previous video. I need a proportion that the under 30 group is of a total. So what I've got to do is add a total. Okay, and then I've got to come in here and do a formula that takes this number and divides by this number. Okay, and there, and the reason it did all that is automatically is because I was working inside what's called a table, so it automates some of our features. And then I'm going to select those and make them all percentages. So that looks nice. So now let's do this. Let's build a chart. So I'm going to go to recommended. I'm not going to do this recommendation because what they're doing is showing you a trend line of the proportions. So I don't know if this is the best option for, but we'll go with it. Okay, so there's a very similar chart. All that back there in blue looks like the one we did a moment ago. Then you got the trend line showing the proportion. Okay, so that's one option. All right, let me do a pie chart from this. So with a pie chart, you can do one of the series or you can do another series. You cannot, with a pie chart, do both. It just won't work because a pie chart is a portion or proportion of a whole, okay? And it talks about that at the bottom of page 212. But let me show you how this works. And I don't want to include the grand totals because that'll skew how my data looks. Okay, so only include the individual data points. So I'm going to do age and number of patients. Don't grab the total because that'll skew your data. So I'm going to insert, and this time I'm going to do a pie chart. So I'm just going to do a basic three-dimensional pie chart. Okay, looks nice. Okay, if I'm not happy with the way this looks, I can use my chart styles to change it up a little bit. You can hover until you get what you like. Some are more dramatic than others. Okay, there's one with a legend. There's one with the data labels. I'll go with this one. Okay, so there's my legend at the bottom. If I want to move my legend, I can come here and go to legend and make it at the right. Okay, then I could actually use my mouse and move this over. Four-headed arrow lets me move it, and I could increase the size of it if I needed to. Okay, and then looking at my pie, I don't know the percentages, so let's add those data labels. So data labels, Where do I want them? The center, inside end, outside end, best fit, callouts. I'm going to go with outside end, and I really would like to make them bigger, so I select one. It selects them all and make them bold. Another thing you can do is explode a piece. Maybe this piece right here needs emphasis. So I can click on this piece, click again, and then drag it away from the pie so it's exploded and kind of stands out. Okay, so just some options that you can do with your pie chart. Okay. Also, if you don't like a particular color of the piece of the pie, maybe this gray over here, I select that individual piece. I come over here to my little paint can and I change the color to make it, let's see, I'm gonna make it a darker gray. A little bit too dark. Go dark. Yeah, just a little darker gray or whatever color I wanted. Okay. So you're not stuck with the colors that they give you. So there's lots of things you can do. Matter of fact, I could come up here to color change and go with a monochrome where they're in the same family of colors, just different tones. Not my favorite. There's some darker versions of those primary colors, kind of like that. Do you see how you can change it up? And there we go. All right, looks good. Okay. All right, so that's a pie chart. All right, I'm going to come back over to this sheet, and what I want to do with this is talk about a 2 or 3 variable. So what I'm going to do is change this up a little bit, and I'm going to make this OB patients. I'm just making this up as I go. Okay, and then I'm going to say and then auto fitting, and then I'm just going to make up some numbers. All right, so you can see that my chart now includes multiple variables. Now, this gray bar is a little bit light, so I'm going to format this to be more pronounced. And there we go. And then something that I am missing is a legend. I really need a legend because I'm using multiple series. So I'm going to click my plus and I'm going to go to legend and I'm going to include it. Okay, so therefore it begins to make more sense. So that's a multiple data point that was talked about a while ago. Okay, all right, now I'm going to move on and I am going to look at the data that you see on the bottom of page 216. And I just roughly put this in, but I did want to show you something here. If you look at that column to the left, it's sequential numbers, 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, all the way through 15. Excel has a really neat feature using this fill handle, F-I-L-L, and it's the little crosshairs that allows it, when you're talking numbers, to fill in, but it didn't. So click your little drop down arrow here and tell it, I want you to fill that series. So when you do that, it automatically puts them in sequential number order. All right, so there we go. So now what I want to do is I want to create, let's see what we want to do there. Okay, so we're looking at our male and female. So I'm going to do a line chart because a line chart, if we look back at page 215, a line chart shows data over time. And that's what we're looking at. We're looking at year after year after year. So we're looking at male, female, and I am going to go to recommended. Notice it recommends a line chart because it senses that we're looking at year after year after year. So therefore, when I click OK, there I have a line chart, and of course, just like I showed you a few minutes ago, you could enhance this with different colors if you wanted to. Um, but that's a line chart that shows you that in 2006 there was a big disparity, and then as time went on, looks like the females caught up with the males, or the males declined as far as numbers. They became more aligned. What was this? Lung and bronchitis, bronchus cancer. So, you know, what I could deduct from this is that more males smoked maybe in 2006 than they do today. However, did I say less or more? More smoked back in 2006 than they do now, or in 2015, um, where back in 2006, not as many females did, but now they do. So that's a big concern there. When you're looking at that, you're seeing that the males have declined in number of lung cancer. And we can deduct from that, I would think, that more females are smoking than males, or maybe, yeah, I could deduct from that. So anyway, just that's the way you do a line chart. And I'm going to do a little bit of work here. Let's see what else I can do with this. Maybe I don't like the colors. I can change those up. Um, yeah, I'm gonna leave that alone. Okay, all right, that's looking good. Now, something they talk about is switching your axis. So let me show you how to do that. I'm going to switch the row and column and watch what happens to my chart. When I do that, now look what it does. That's probably not a good look there. So that would not work well for that chart. However, let me undo that. There we go. All right, let me go back to this. Let me go here. Yeah, let's go here. So if I were to switch the row and column here, watch what it does. So now you've got the age ranges, are the axis, not axis, legend. Okay, a lot of bars going on there. I think it was easier to read when we had it this way. So it's just a preference, whatever's easier to read. Okay. All right, now let's go look at some more data. When you look at I want you to look with me on page 219. They talk about what's called a scatter diagram. And a scatter diagram is basically showing, is there a correlation or is there not? And look at the definition of this. Also called a scatter plot on page 219, is used to graphically show the relationship between two numerical variables. A scatter diagram is used to determine whether there is a correlation, that is, a relationship between two characteristics. They go on to say correlation implies that as one variable changes, the other one also changes. Doesn't necessarily mean there's a cause and effect, but it's just saying that as one changes, the other one changes. And based on the scatter diagram, sometimes there's no correlation or a positive relationship, sometimes it's negative, sometimes it can't be determined. So what you're seeing on page 219 is a positive relationship, in that it looks like both um, numerical variables are moving basically at the same time. So you see that there's a direction that looks very similar to the other direction. If you look at the diamonds and squares and X's, the trend looks very similar in all instances. So yes, there is a positive relationship. But if you look over at the figure 11.9, that's another example of a scatter diagram, and there's no movement whatsoever. And so therefore it's a negative relationship. So if you look at what they say about 11.9 back on page 219, in contrast, 11.9 shows a scatter diagram with a negative relationship. That is, the small values of the x-axis correspond to the large values of the y-axis, and the large values of the x-axis correspond to the small values of the y-axis. And it says it shows a strong correlation because the cluster of points is tight. So, I mean, they're very tight, but that's considered a negative relationship. And then the one at the bottom, I mean, there's no pattern whatsoever going on there in 1110. Therefore, there is showing no relationship. So that's what a scatter diagram shows us. Now, I want to look at the top of page 221, and this example, cardiology team, a community hospital believes there's a relationship between the number of internal medicine transfers and cardiology transfers. So let's do a scatter diagram, but before I do that, I'm going to put in January, okay, and show you how we can use that fill handle to save us a lot of time. So when I do that, it automatically populates the remaining cells. So that's a pretty cool little tool. All right, so here we go. So I'm going to select my data, and I'm going to go to Insert, and I am going to go to, let's see if it's here, yeah, Scatter Diagram. And I'm going to click this one, and there's what I get. Okay, so to me, let's see where we are. Make sure I had all the same data. Yeah, they want me to put in some data labels, so I'm going to add axis titles, specifically the primary vertical, which is the y-axis, and I'm going to make this okay. Now, my scatter diagram does not look like, let me make sure. They don't, they're not looking like what you see in the textbook. But what I would deduct from this, if you look at, let's see if I can do this. I'm adding a what's called a trend line. Yeah, so what I would deduct from that is that there is a positive relationship there for that information. All right. Okay, so now I think that's really it. Look on page 222 with me, and they talk about what's called a histogram. A histogram is similar to a column chart. It's just that when you look at frequency distributions, using a histogram is a good way to, when it's frequency distributions on a continual basis, that's where it is uh, applicable to use a what we call a histogram. Um, Over on page 223, a couple of other examples here. We have a frequency polygon. That you see that in 1113 there in the middle of the page. And what's unique about this is similar to a histogram, but it allows you to basically see it in a line format instead of a bar. So it's just, again, it's basically doing the same thing that a histogram would do. You're just seeing it, and they have the little points there that make it a little bit easier to read. And then we have a pictogram. Now, Excel does not produce pictograms, but that is what that is, where you're basically using little pictures to indicate things. Might be people, might be cars, might be uh, syringes, I don't know. So different things that could be used as a pictogram. All right, so I hope that helps you to do a little bit of Excel work. Another thing that's really neat about Excel is that if a number changes, I'm going to change this dramatically to 75, you see that the chart is automatically affected. It automatically updates it. If I come over here and change one of these numbers, you can see that the chart is automatically affected by that. If I come here and change this number to, I don't know, 20, you can see that the chart is automatically affected. Okay, so I hope this helps you to feel comfortable with creating various charts. Again, typically the charts that we use are going to be column charts or bar charts, pie charts, line charts. Those are the most popular ones that we typically use in construction of these visual tools. All right, so I hope this helps you, and let me know if you need help.